Good evening. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jasmine Allender. I am Dean of Humanities here at UC Santa Cruz, and it's my pleasure to start with a couple short opening remarks. And what we like to do is situate ourselves in where we're at, and so I'm going to start with our land acknowledgement. The land on which we gather is the unceded territory of the Awaswas-speaking Yubi tribe. The Ama Mutsun tribal band, comprised of the descendants of indigenous people taken to missions Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast, is today working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and heal from historical trauma. Today, we welcome Maryana Iskander, the CEO. I totally blew that. I cannot believe it. I knew it. God. Of the Wikimedia Foundation, joins us for the 2024 Peggy Baskin Ethics Lecture with a talk titled Humans in the Loop, Wikipedia's Future in the Age of AI. And as Dean of the Humanities Division, we are certainly interested in keeping humans in the loop. And we've got our work cut out for us. Yes, we strive to understand how humans seek meaning, how we forge identities and cultures, how we make our voices heard. We think that the humanities are an essential component of a well-rounded liberal arts college education. We think the humanities prepare students not just for jobs and careers, but for lifelong learning, happiness, and meaningful engagement in the world. The wealth of the experiences that we provide in the classroom and beyond help our students become the kind of creative and critical problem solvers and communicators that every profession needs and the world itself needs now more than ever. So I believe that the humanities must play a central role in solving the complex problems we face and in the iteration of the engaged democracy that we aspire to be. So that means we need to reverse the current trend and encourage more students to study the humanities. Our Central Student Success Initiative is called Employing Humanities, and it addresses career preparedness for humanities majors and creates resonant humanities curriculum for STEM majors, emphasizing ethics, equity, and racial and social justice. Through a grant from the Mellon Foundation, we are expanding our capacity to offer experiential learning to all humanities majors. And with a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities, we launched a humanities certificate program called Humanizing Technology, geared to engineering students. Humanizing Technology encourages students to explore the impacts of new and existing technologies, helping them develop critical thinking about social and cultural systems that inform these technologies and provides them with the tools for becoming socially responsible professionals. We have new courses, including a course on ethics and technology, and a course called Artificial Intelligence and Human Imagination. This lecture series brings incredible intellectual vibrancy to our campus and our alumni community. Past lectures have included Nobel and Pulitzer Prize-winning American novelist Toni Morrison, Booker Prize-winning author Margaret Atwood, and American journalist Ezra Klein, who we're proud to call an alum. Last year, we welcomed Joy Connolly, the president of the American Council of Learned Societies. This is a very special year for the Baskin Ethics Lecture Series, which launched in 2010 thanks to the Peggy Baskin Humanities Endowment for Interdisciplinary Ethics, established in honor of Peggy Baskin's longtime interest in ethical issues across the academic spectrum. While I did not have the opportunity to meet her in person before she passed away in December, by all accounts, Peggy was an intelligent, bold, generous individual whose life impacted many, including mine, and is impacting all of ours this evening. So I want to thank the entire Baskin family, some of whom are joining us this evening, for your support and the tremendous impact that you and your family have had on our campus. Is Bettina here? I would now like to invite Professor Emerita of Feminist Studies, Bettina Apdecker, to the podium to offer a remembrance of her friend, Peggy Baskin.
Good evening. I'm a little short. I don't know what you can see of me, but I can see you. Okay. So, it is my pleasure to be with you this evening, welcoming you to the Peggy Downs Baskin Ethics Lecture with Maryana Iskander. Peggy died in December, and I have been invited to offer a few things to celebrate her life. And I also especially want to thank Cammie and Scott, her children, who are here today with us. Peggy and I became acquainted with each other sometime in the early 1980s, and we became close friends over the years. When I first met her, it was at Monterey Peninsula College, where my partner, now wife, was teaching in their women's studies program. Peggy was a great partisan of women's studies and also, as you know, an immensely generous woman. In addition to donations to that program, she also helped to establish and sustain what was called a woman's pantry, housed in the program's offices. This pantry was open to MPC students who could come by and help themselves to whatever food they needed for themselves and their children. This kind of initiative was typical of Peggy. She cared so deeply about women and doing what she could to foster their educational opportunities, their well-being, and their leadership potential. Her philanthropy was well known at MPC and also at Cabrillo College and at the University of Santa Clara, where she taught for many years, and of course here at UCSC. Born in 1930 in Seattle, Peggy attended Vassar College, graduating magna cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa in 1952. Like so many women she later supported, Peggy returned to school many years later, attending the Claremont Graduate School of Public Policy, where she got her PhD, just about the time when I met her. She went on to teaching for 18 years at Santa Clara University in the Department of Political Science. Her forte was presidential politics, and I'll tell you, I wish she was here today. We could really use her. We need help badly. Anyway, presidential politics. And her passion was for women's leadership. In the early 2000s, Peggy joined the Women's Studies faculty here at UCSC as a senior lecturer and taught classes on women's politics. She was always encouraging her students to work hard, believe in themselves, and become leaders in their communities. Students loved her. She was accessible and a warm and caring presence in our department. Peggy published quite a few scholarly articles in journals and several books. I recall most vividly the publication of her co-authored book, Beyond Superwoman, in 2004, which we celebrated in Women's Studies on the occasion of our 25th anniversary. Among her collaborators was our chancellor then, Marcy Greenwood, one of the first women chancellors here at UCSC. And there was sparkles, laughter, generosity for the occasion. A few years later, Peggy gifted me an absolutely gorgeous book of photographs that she had taken with the accompanying text that she had also written. The book was called The Wandering Spirit, Through the Lens of Time, and was published in 2010. This way I learned that Peggy was an immensely talented photographer, about which I had no idea up until then. Over the years of our friendship, we had lunch together or dinner here in Santa Cruz or in Monterey or somewhere or in between. We shared life stories. I read part of a memoir she wrote and marveled at her sheer bravery, resourcefulness, and determination. She did not always have money. She struggled. She worked hard. She raised her children. She had an internal toughness garnered by life experiences, but she never lost her great tenderness and enormous love. She delighted in her marriage to Jack Baskin, who, ironically, I had known for decades, beginning in the 1960s in the Bay Area, but that's another story. Sometime in the early 2000s, she handed me a check. It was unexpected, and I said, "What's this for?" About to stick it in my pocket. She said, "Look at it." It was for $10,000 for women's studies. Nobody had ever handed me a check for $10,000 in my entire life. I was quite overwhelmed. Shortly thereafter, she created another fund to augment the success of women's reentry students into our department. And then, of course, she and Jack established the funding for this annual ethics lecture for the humanities, an issue about which Peggy cared deeply. And since the dean has already enumerated some of our luminaries who spoke at it, I won't go through that again. But it's been a wonderful initiative for our campus. Finally, in 2016, Peggy gave our department, renamed Feminist Studies in 2004, an endowment of $500,000, which was matched by another $500,000 from the UC president. This is a $1 million legacy, which Peggy made possible. I had the honor of holding the first endowed chair from 2017 to 2021. It is entirely fitting to Peggy's life and legacy that through this endowed chair we can provide research and travel funds for students and faculty and bring scholars and activists to the campus to continue to inspire our students. Above all else, in all of these contributions and accolades, I can say that I loved Peggy for her deeply caring friendship and her profound love for all of humanity. Her memory will always be for a blessing. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Bettina, for that touching and also very joyous remembrance. Thanks as well to Dean Jasmine Alinder for her remarks and her support for this event. My name is Pranav Anand, and I'm faculty director at the Humanities Institute, the research and public programming arm of the Humanities Division here at UC Santa Cruz. In that capacity, it's my privilege to introduce our speaker for this evening, Maryana Iskander. Before I invite Maryana to the stage, I would like to share a few details about the event. After the lecture, I'll join Maryana here for a very short conversation. I promise it'll be short. I warned her I would monopolize the time otherwise, so you have to keep me to that promise. And then we'll take questions from both our in-person audience and our audience on Zoom. I don't know our audience on Zoom. For guests in the Hay Barn, for the faculty member, I have a prop here for you. Please use the note cards provided to submit your questions, and staff will collect them following the lecture. I'll remind you, but if you can pass them inwards towards the center, that will be easiest for us. For those online, we're using a Zoom webinar tool, so there's no chat function, and use the Q&A tool to submit your questions. Finally, I should note that the event is being recorded. As you all know, since it's likely what brought you here this evening, Maryana is the CEO of Wikimedia Foundation, the nonprofit organization that manages a host of websites, including Wiktionary, which is my personal favorite as a linguist. I'm always on Wiktionary, a global dictionary, that's what it is. Wikimedia Commons, the world's largest open library of audiovisual material, and of course, Wikipedia, one of the top 10 visited websites in the world. 2 days ago, it was number 4. Maryana started as CEO of Wikimedia in 2022, so 2 years ago. But in some sense, she's been building to this position for her entire life. A citizen of 2 continents, Maryana was born in Cairo, Egypt, relocating to the US when she was 4. Skipping ahead a few decades, she received a BA magna cum laude in sociology from Rice University, where she served as both student body president and was a Harry S. Truman Fellow on the staff of Montana Senator Max Baucus. She then received a master's in science and comparative social policy from Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar, and went to Yale Law School, supported by a Paul and Daisy Soros Fellowship for New Americans. In recent years, her career accomplishments have brought a string of additional honors and awards, including Distinguished Alum Awards at Rice and Yale, a Henry Crown Fellowship at the Aspen Institute that's for community-spirited leaders, election to Yale's Board of Trustees, and service on the boards of the Nelson Mandela Children's Hospital and Co-Impact, a global philanthropic collective. I cut it a bit short. Maryana's biography highlights 2 core values throughout her career: breaking down systemic barriers to opportunity and education, and forging solutions through collaboration. She says she works to answer the question, what do you devote your time and talents to that will make the world a fairer and better place for others? In Maryana's case, answering that question led her to clerk on the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, serve as an advisor to the president of Rice, spend 6 years as COO of Planned Parenthood, and then 10 years as CEO of Harambee Youth Employment Accelerator in South Africa, where she now calls home. Harambee is a nonprofit that tackles South Africa's high rates of youth unemployment by reframing the issue, finding what prospective youth employees are really good at, training them further, and then connecting them with employers. In 2019, Maryana and Harambee received the Skoll Award for Social Entrepreneurship for their work connecting 100,000 youth, at the time 100,000, with jobs through 500 businesses. It's grown since then, I learned. Building this kind of network requires a great deal of collaboration. For Maryana, collaborating starts from recognizing a group's multitude of perspectives and then working through those perspectives to a shared problem and a shared framing of that problem. The idea of sharing is really important here. As she notes in another interview that you can find on YouTube, she's given so many, it was really fun to watch many of them. She's very quotable as well. We have to find ways to be in a society together. Openness, of sharing, and of learning, and making it a two-way way of being holds promise as the only way to achieve progress. This ethic of openness, of sharing and learning, of a two-way way of being is one that she brings to the challenges of the Wikimedia Foundation today, ones she'll discuss tonight. Some of them are about the artificial intelligence epic we are on the cusp of, or maybe just past the cusp of. But others are about good old-fashioned problems of access across systemic barriers that have been with us always and will be with us for always. Despite its linguistic and cultural diversity in comparison to the global internet, Wikipedia reflects and refracts global imbalances, with a majority of contributors self-identifying as male, and the lion's share of traffic and pages on the site belonging to world-dominant languages like English and Japanese. Those are the two biggest. These are issues that Maryana has publicly pledged to change by increasing the contributions from the global south. But as she acknowledged to the Washington Post when she started, scaling people in departments and tasks and activities, lots of people do that. But I think how you scale culture alongside that is much harder. I think this quote encapsulates not just the challenge Wikipedia faces, but the one we all face. How can we make communities more just, inclusive, and equitable, especially in the face of technologies that have served to divide and balkanize us? This is an urgent question of practical ethics, precisely the kind that requires the interdisciplinary perspectival ambit of the Baskin ethics lecture, and that Maryana's career dedicated to access and collaboration is particularly well suited to address. With that, I'd like to invite Maryana Iskander to the stage to deliver this 12th Peggy Downs Baskin ethics lecture.
Wow, I said to Pranav, that's like the nicest introduction anybody has ever given. I sent the link to my parents, so I don't know if, hopefully they heard that. Otherwise, we'll get a copy. Jasmine borrowed my glasses, so we got a lot of red on the screen. I didn't have a chance to welcome all of you, but I tried to get around to meeting a lot of you. So just thank you again for making time to come and be here. I am privileged and honored to have been invited to give this lecture. I think in addition to that remarkable story of some of the things that I've done in my life, I'm a big believer in the power of why people do things in their lives. What does that say about who they are? And I didn't have the benefit in advance of your incredible remarks, but I tried to learn a bit about Peggy Downs Baskin myself, and she was definitely a woman ahead of her time. When I think about my own life journey as an immigrant to this country, as well as the professional work that I've chosen to do with my career, I am particularly grateful for what she did to champion the rights and promote the participation of women in society. So it's really a privilege to be here and to be able to share some remarks. I do just want to say thank you, not just to Peggy and her family, but to UC Santa Cruz and the Humanities Institute, and just an opportunity, I hope, to actually have a conversation. We have folks online, but this room feels like a space we can talk. And that's what I hope that we'll be able to do tonight. I have a few questions for the audience, so you can decide if you want to participate. We're going to try some humor, so you might humor me by laughing, but we'll see how I do. So I've titled this talk, Humans in the Loop, because I want to share with you why Wikipedia is doubling down on humans at a time when it feels like artificial intelligence is sending everyone in the other direction. We talk at Wikipedia about approaching artificial intelligence through what we call closed-loop systems. And what that means is that humans are in that loop. They edit, improve, and review the work that may be done by machines. So I want to talk about how does that actually work? What does that mean? And what can it teach us about some of the ethical implications of technology? Many of you are, I think, familiar with Wikipedia. It started about 20 years ago, and at the beginning, it was treated by the media as a reporter, this is a quote, said, something between a fluke and a quirky outlier. Early coverage tended to focus on its most novel aspects, that it's written by anyone. It is edited collaboratively. It's completely free to access. And educational institutions, including and especially universities, treated Wikipedia with healthy skepticism and disapproval for a long time. So an online project that was initially derided as a joke has now become the last best place on the internet. Some have even called it the last bastion of shared reality. In highly polarized societies like the United States, where the battle for truth remains contested on all sides. The information that you read on Wikipedia is written by humans all around the world, to the tune of about 345 edits every single minute. These people, who can range from students to teachers, doctors, scientists, even grandmothers, I'm going to get to that, they are the reason that this is often one of the first sources of information that is cited for breaking news. Everything from election results, sports coverage, and particularly celebrity deaths. So I think the story of this transformation from internet joke to the last bastion of shared truth is why I believe that Wikipedia has something special to teach the world about human motivation and ingenuity at a time when it can feel like technological change is outpacing us. I thought that I would start by reminding you and teaching you, for those of you new to Wikipedia, the 5 founding pillars that were created right at the beginning. I studied these before I did the Washington Post interview, and they have, for me, remained such a test of Wikipedia's durability that I think will remain true in the age of AI. So the first principle is that Wikipedia is an encyclopedia. This means, and I'm quoting here, Wikipedia is not a soapbox, it is not an advertising platform, it is not a vanity press, it's not an experiment in anarchy or democracy, it's not an indiscriminate collection of information, and it's not a web directory. What it is, and what our mission speaks to, is creating a living encyclopedia that can serve as an accurate repository of digital knowledge. The second pillar is that Wikipedia has a neutral point of view. This means that volunteers who edit the encyclopedia must impartially describe and summarize information instead of debating them. They do not write to convince, but to explain and inform. I want to repeat that. They do not write to convince, but to explain and inform. This pillar states, as quoted, personal experiences, interpretations, or opinions do not belong on Wikipedia. The third principle is that Wikipedia is always free for anyone to use. This is an almost radical idea in today's world of technology. And it's one of the many industry trends that Wikipedia has bucked since its inception. No volunteer owns an article that they have written. Any contributions can and may be mercilessly edited and widely redistributed. And that's because the content is subject to what is known as a free and open license. This helps explain why Wikipedia is often the source of information that's used by other things on the internet to serve up answers to you, your voice assistant. So oftentimes when the internet is giving you information, the internet is getting it from Wikipedia. And I think that that is a part of being able to disseminate free knowledge to as many people as possible. Wikipedia's fourth pillar is about assuming good faith, respect, and civility. Concepts that feel increasingly in short order across many institutions of our society. By design, Wikipedia only has one article for any given topic. So that means there isn't an article about what some people think about climate change and another article about what other people think about climate change. There is only one article about Donald Trump. There is only one article about the origins of the COVID virus. For this to work, our volunteer editors have to discuss, debate, often disagree, until a shared consensus relying on verified sources can be reached. And by the way, all of this debating and disagreeing is done transparently and completely in the open. My favorite pillar is the last one, which will move us to the role of AI. Wikipedia has no firm rules. I love this. From the very beginning, the co-founder of Wikipedia, Jimmy Wales, and the editors who started this knew that the world and that the internet were going to continue to change constantly, and Wikipedia had to also be able to change to keep up. So I want to share a story of how these pillars come to life in our day-to-day work. In my first year at the Wikimedia Foundation, which Pranav said is the nonprofit that operates Wikipedia and other free knowledge projects, we had the most views to a Wikipedia page in a single day ever. Do you think you can guess why? Taylor Swift, I hear? No. But, close. It was September 8th, 2022, the day that the death of Queen Elizabeth II was officially announced. Volunteer Wikipedians around the world organically organized themselves into a small online group. They named themselves Wiki Project London Bridge. They dedicated around-the-clock eyes and ears to identifying key articles where edits needed to be made, creating new articles where they were needed, and most importantly, confirming accurate and verified information as the news was developing. On that day, traffic to Wikipedia spiked to levels we had never seen before, as the former Queen's article across 180 languages was viewed nearly 20 million times. 60% of that traffic was to languages other than English. In moments like these, when Wikipedia is recording history for the world in real time, what we see happen is that many news organizations, search engines, begin to point to Wikipedia and pull up to the second information from us because it's the source that they trust. And thanks to our volunteers and our behind-the-scenes staff engineers, the site stayed current and did not crash, which is quite a feat. I work in an organization when a celebrity dies, everybody goes into crisis mode because that is what happens. So about a year later, the foundation released the list of the most popular articles for the year. Since Wikipedia gets, on average, about 15 billion visits a month, so that's roughly the entire population of the world twice, it's a useful data point for understanding what people want to know. So in 2023, what do you think was the most viewed article on the English language version of Wikipedia? Not Taylor Swift. Well, it wasn't Barbie or Oppenheimer, although Indian cricket scores came close. It was the article about ChatGPT. And as one analyst observed, when people want to know what ChatGPT is, they're not asking ChatGPT, they're coming to Wikipedia. I think with ChatGPT and similar technologies, we've seen mind-blowing advances in the use of artificial intelligence. Organizations, large and small, have introduced dozens of what are called large language models. They're trained on enormous data sets, and they can read and summarize and respond to text. These models are applied through both commercial and open source tools. How many people, since we're all here in the room together, have used ChatGPT to figure out travel tips or help you write something? Come on now, there we go. Well, I think that's one of the reasons that ChatGPT has become one of the fastest growing internet platforms ever. History has shown us that technology can be a force for good in the development of society and to increase opportunities and access. I believe that. And there's no doubt that that's true for AI. One of Google's subsidiaries recently developed a system that can predict the 3D protein structures for almost every organism on Earth. More than 1.4 million researchers from over 190 countries, which is practically all of them, have accessed this database, using the information to design cures for diseases like malaria, liver cancer, and Parkinson's. But these innovations do come with difficult ethical questions. We don't have to look far to find examples of the risks of relying too heavily on AI tools. We've seen published research that's based on incorrect or fictional information, even worse, things that can spread dangerous misinformation. As Pranav mentioned, I serve on the board of a university, and I know that institutions of higher education have been on the front lines of asking and trying to tackle the complex questions that are being raised about the use of AI across all dimensions of our society. And I think that this is a particularly important space for the humanities, where disciplines like history and philosophy and linguistics, literature, art, and others must add to our understanding of how technology is shaping the human experience. What can a collaborative, open, and deeply human project like Wikipedia also add? Since its early days, Wikipedia has shown that machine learning and AI tools can be used to supplement and enhance the work of humans. One of the very first bots that was used right at the very beginning was one that would take census data and be able to insert that information into Wikipedia articles about US cities and states as that information got updated. And from there, our volunteers continued to expand and build, and we've had a team at the foundation dedicated to machine learning since 2017. It's much smaller than the ones at the other large tech platforms. But our AI tools are built on the same principles that have made Wikipedia such a useful resource to all of you, centering human decision-making in everything we do, from the content that's published on the articles, to the policies that are created by volunteers, to the decisions that are made by the communities who self-govern Wikipedia. All of this experimentation over 2 decades has taught us lessons that I really believe can serve as pillars for the next evolution of AI technology. So what I wanted to do was propose 5 forward-looking pillars for how AI can learn from Wikipedia. The first is that AI needs humans to build the sum of all knowledge. So what do I mean by that? Our vision and our mission statement is for a world in which every single human can share freely in the sum of all knowledge. It's a powerful statement. And on some days it feels almost impossible, given how much digital knowledge is still missing from cultures and societies all around the world. The example that I want to give, again, Pranav's introduction was so excellent. He covered many of my points, is that less than 20% of the biographies on the English Wikipedia are about women. This is because of a lack of recognition about the achievements of women throughout history, and then it is reflected in the encyclopedia. So why does that matter? Well, it matters because every commercially available large language model has been trained on Wikipedia content. It is almost always the single largest source of training data in these data sets. So that means the gaps in what we know, the biases in our information, the untold stories throughout history of people who have been left out, like women and people of color, are also not represented in the training data for AI models. So AI knows what we tell it. In this mission, I am inspired every day by the work of Wikipedians. And as a person who lives on the African continent, I was pretty startled to discover that only 5% of the pages about Africa on the English Wikipedia are written by people in Africa. So this is Dr. Nkem. She is a librarian based in Nigeria, and she is busy at work trying to change this statistic. In 2020, she organized the first African Librarians Week, encouraging more than 800 librarians to add citations about African history and culture to Wikipedia pages. Dr. Nkem has a compelling vision of librarians telling the stories of their communities on a global platform like Wikipedia. Continued innovation in AI models is going to require more human-created knowledge, and especially knowledge that is still missing. The second pillar is that AI must be as open as possible. For AI technology to solve some of the biggest challenges that we face as a society, I believe we have to build it together in the open. Now, open can mean a lot of things: open source, open software, open licenses, open attribution. Those of you who are familiar with Wikipedia know that it was born out of the open movement. It is entirely transparent from the content on Wikipedia pages down to our code. You can go back and see every single change ever made to any page, the discussion that editors have when debating whether or not to publish a particular fact or settle on a particular sentence. You can see what everybody has added and why. Everyone does their decision-making in the open. Now, transparency is an outcome of being more open, but for me, trust is the ultimate goal. And building trust today is harder than it's ever been, especially given the influence of social media companies that may use or misuse personal information. And really, unlike all of these other platforms, I mean, being ranked number 4 means you're up there with a lot of the other very large companies. Wikipedia does not collect personal data. We have no idea what you looked up, how long you stayed on a certain page, what you clicked on next, and that's by design. Because our incentives are different, we don't track or target readers, we don't monetize reading or editing patterns, we collect as little data as possible about our users, we keep it for as short of a period as possible. It does mean we don't know things that people wish we knew, but that is the choice that we've made. So you should never feel that somebody is looking over your shoulder when you're searching online for information and knowledge when you're on the Wikipedia platform. And that kind of commitment to working in the open makes Wikipedia an important voice to speak on the inputs and the outputs of AI, especially calling for transparency about the sources that AI tools rely on, how references and attributions back to those sources can be made more visible, not to mention the sustainability of motivating humans to continue volunteering. We have to look at commercial models, how they handle attribution, and talk about what has been contributed and by who. Now, our own machine learning team, when somebody tells you this is not possible, I just want to say, our own machine learning team demonstrates that it is possible to do all of these things in the open as a way to increase transparency and build more sustainability. All of the models that we use on Wikipedia are open source. We make all of our AI experiments public. We invite feedback. And the leader of our machine learning team even live streams his work. You can see his code, his ticketing system for errors. You can watch his internal chat. You can see how he tries to solve problems in real time. It's totally wild, but it can be done. So I believe that other AI models can learn a lot from this approach, and it starts with a commitment to work in the open. The third pillar relates to collaborative governance models, which I think could help increase trust in AI. So Wikipedia is based on a collaborative model of volunteer self-governance. Users are empowered to govern themselves through policies they create for content, coordination, and collaboration. This approach to content moderation matters for developing reliable and accurate information online, especially in an increasingly polarized world. What we're seeing is an erosion in trust, not just across the information ecosystem, so media, journalism, but also to our institutions, even to scientific inquiry. You look at studies from Pew Research and Gallup in 2023, they said that in the US, public trust in the federal government and in institutions is back at near record lows after a modest uptick during the pandemic. And young people under 26 trust the information they receive from major institutions even less. I see a lot of people nodding. So I believe that AI can learn from how Wikipedia is governed as a way to increase trust as technology rapidly evolves. One example is that the foundation creates and shares extensive documentation about all of our machine learning models. This includes evaluation scores for how that model is performing for different demographics and marginalized groups. And that's freely published so that self-governed communities can make more informed decisions about how to use these models to identify problematic content or to fight misinformation. We saw this in action during the COVID-19 pandemic, when Wikipedia actually became one of the most frequently accessed sources for health information. The medical content had more page views than any other health information resource online. We had more than 35,000 articles on health and medicine that were being tracked by a dedicated group of humans. Emergency room doctors, medical school professors, researchers, and clinicians. They're part of a group that's called Wiki Project Medicine. As new information came to light, as new vaccines were being developed, as new facts were being debated and confirmed, these were added to Wikipedia. To combat growing misinformation about COVID, these volunteers came together to create dozens of articles in many languages that, again, were intended to inform and educate, not to convince or persuade. One of these doctors is a remarkable Wikipedian. She's here on the screen, Dr. Netta Hussain. She wrote, updated, and translated dozens of articles on Wikipedia. She also worked on a vaccine safety project to make sure that information was just more accessible to more people. And for her work during the pandemic, Netta was recognized as a Wikimedian of the Year and received the Women Open Source Award from Red Hat, because it's really important to recognize these contributions. Just this week, the Wikimedia Foundation has gathered a group of leading academics and researchers and AI experts to discuss how to build a shared research agenda that focuses on to collectively sustain human motivation to contribute to the knowledge commons. This might freak out the academics in the room. They met on Monday, and the goal was to publish on Thursday before they left on Friday. And they did it because the point was to put an imperfect document into the open as quickly as possible for others to improve and to review. And I think this collaborative approach and how we govern and develop tools that influence our society is a core value that Wikipedia shares with academia and institutions of higher learning. The fourth pillar is that Wikipedia must serve and represent a multilingual world. So most of you, I'm assuming, are familiar with Wikipedia because you've probably looked up something in English. I'm curious for people in the room, has anybody here either looked up or even edited Wikipedia in a language other than English? Amazing. Okay, we have a lot of hands up for the folks on Zoom. Given that the next billion people who will come online are predominantly from South Asia and Africa, we cannot continue making the digital future one that is available primarily in English. Yet many of the largest AI chatbots were trained mostly on English content and perform best in English. There is work underway to improve this and expand training data sets to other languages, but these efforts are still pretty far from representing the breadth and multilingual diversity of people online. Our own volunteers, it will not surprise you, got busy experimenting with ChatGPT as soon as it was released, and they were not surprised to see that the kind of output that it produced was much lower quality in non-English languages. Now look, these limitations are based on the biases of the existing internet. Less than 1% of the internet is in Arabic, even though Arabic is one of the most widely spoken languages in the world, used daily by more than 400 million people. Millions of people do not have access to digital content in their native language. Wikipedia is actually one of the most multilingual platforms on the internet. It exists in over 330 languages. And translations from one language to another are not done automatically, but with humans involved. So as an example, we have a translation service called Mint. It uses advanced AI technology to support volunteers in creating and improving machine translations in about 200 languages that are spoken by people all over the world and are highly underrepresented on the internet. This service provides translation support so that volunteers who speak those languages can review the machine translation, sign off on it before it goes into new articles. I want to tell you the remarkable story of an editor. His name is Iflak. He's a Wikipedian who started editing in English, which is where most people kind of naturally start if they speak English. 6 months later, he discovered that there was a Kashmiri Wikipedia, which is his native language. He was disappointed to learn that a language that's spoken by over 7 million people only had 300 articles and a handful of active contributors on Wikipedia. So he decided this is something that he wanted to change. He shifted his own editing from English to Kashmiri, and he started trying to translate articles. At first, he said it was really time-consuming because he needed to kind of start from scratch. There wasn't an embedded dictionary. There weren't kind of suggested words. And the Mint tool that I described to you came into being, and within a 4-month period, he had doubled the number of articles on Kashmiri Wikipedia pretty single-handedly, had recruited some help. But so around the world, what we see is that Wikipedians work with local communities to preserve cultural heritage and language. We have a community group, I've said earlier, called Wiki Grannies. It's for real. These are a group of older women, many of them living in rural areas in the Bashkiria region of Russia. They have taken to Wikipedia as a way to record their history and heritage in their native language of Bashkir. Many of their children and grandchildren go to school in the Russian language. So for them, this is a way of keeping their language alive. And since 2016, they've been translating Russian articles to Bashkir. And thanks to their work, Bashkir Wikipedia is in the top 20 for the most translations. All right, the last pillar, AI could learn some humility from Wikipedia. I recently read an article by a tech journalist. He was reviewing a competitor product to ChatGPT. And he said at the end of the article that he found it deeply refreshing and reassuring when the tool he was testing admitted to not knowing something. He ended the article by saying, most of the AI chat products, this is his quote, lack this kind of humility. Their responses sound confident even when they're spouting nonsense. Having now spent a couple of years meeting volunteers from nearly every corner of Earth, I want to tell you that Wikipedia's humility is something that a lot of others in the tech world can learn from. I don't think that our volunteers would mind me describing it as a pedantic obsession with getting things exactly right, inviting improvement if someone knows more, and being totally open about getting it completely wrong. So I was trying to think about what is the best way of showing this to you today, because this commitment to getting things as right as possible while admitting openly when it is completely wrong is amazing. We have a page on Wikipedia about the biggest hoaxes on Wikipedia, so I could send you there. There's also a page about edit wars, which are ongoing debates amongst editors that usually remain ongoing for a long time about literally hundreds of questions that matter to somebody. Are the Bee Gees a British or Australian group? Was ceviche first invented in Peru or Ecuador? Was Robin Williams born in 1951 or in 1952? One of my favorites, and I'm going to quote this without joking, is Scotland a constituent country linked to a constituent country, or a country within a country linking to a constituent country, or a country linking to a constituent country, or a country linking to country, or a semi-autonomous subdivision of the United Kingdom, or a semi-autonomous constituent subdivision of the United Kingdom, or a semi-autonomous subdivision of the United Kingdom, or a home nation, or a kingdom, or a part, or a province, or a region, or a combination of any of the above, or none of the above. Now, while these may be titled some of the lamest edit wars on Wikipedia, what they do remind us is that humans are debating these maybe obscure questions, and they are not hallucinating. In fact, they're laughing, usually. So our head of product and technology said to me that she feels like the world of AI would also benefit from a little bit more humor, and I agree with her. In the past year and a half, we've seen how polarizing AI can be. But we have to remember that AI is a tool. It is not a predetermined outcome. It is up to all of us to think about how to best apply it to help humans solve difficult problems. Back in 2001, nobody expected a free encyclopedia on the internet would become such a ubiquitous part of daily life. Yet over time, this community-led process of deliberation, conversation, and creation has created a remarkable, far-reaching, reliable collection of knowledge for the world. Wikipedia has become the internet's public library, an online communal gathering space where people can discuss and debate the facts on any topic with the goal of writing a well-informed article that others can improve. And that approach that Wikipedians have taken is that knowledge is human. That's the power of having nearly 300,000 volunteers contributing every month. You may see the website, but I hope that you can see how much more sits behind it. And one of the most remarkable things is that the sheer scale has not dampened the curiosity of those who contribute. This commitment to human curiosity is an essential element of any society that is striving for openness, transparency, and societal values of good. The benefit of AI is directly tied to human knowledge, that it trains and that it learns from. AI needs people. And for knowledge to grow, for AI to continue to improve and enhance our lives, I think AI needs to big bet on humans. Thank you very much.
we make it the model for the future?
It's a great question. I had said to many of you when I welcomed you at the door that these are really complex questions, so I don't know all the answers. I think that there are a lot of complex market dynamics that lead to the trends that you describe. But I want to give you a counterexample because, again, the point is to show that it can be another way. And so one of the things that we do at the Wikimedia Foundation is we work very closely with institutions of cultural heritage, so museums, galleries, archives, libraries. Not exactly in the same way, but they hold on to what they've got. It's close in. And through a process of learning and sharing, they come to see that by opening up their archives, by putting their content on Wikipedia, it drives all the things they want. More people see their collections, more people come visit them. And so again, this kind of incentive of like, we're gonna hold it all in because that's what's gonna be best for us, we have proven with a lot of data that is not true. And so the Smithsonian's Open Access Project, working with a lot of the large museums, not just in the United States, but all over the world, is if that picture is on Wikipedia through Commons, as you mentioned, it will get more eyeballs on it than will ever happen on your website or people coming, and it drives a different incentive. So it's a data point that there can be other ways, and that we can think about it institutionally, not just in the context of journalism and sources. So I don't know how to reverse some of these very complex market trends around journalism. But what I do know is that I think that lifting up more of these examples of you think it's going to be better to keep it closed off, but actually opening it up may lead you to better outcomes than what you thought.
That's very fair, right? That hope is a powerful vehicle for change. So I got very excited to start talking to you. I didn't do the thing that I promised, which is to remind you all that if you have questions, you should be writing them down now, while I'm talking, not while Maryana's talking, and pass them to the center for us to collect. Okay, I have another related question, which I think is a bit harder than that, and that is that Wikipedia relies on that vast army of volunteer contributors, which you really showed the diversity of the contributors, and you talked a lot about their motivations. But I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the tension between that volunteerism, which involves some amount of self-selection, and that problem of recruiting a diverse pool of experts around the world, which is a problem that I think we're facing even within academia, right? That there's a certain amount of privilege that comes with being able to be obsessed with a topic and contribute to Wikipedia. So how do you reckon with that?
Well, I would make a couple of observations. I mean, it is fact, as you described even in your introduction, that most of the people who contribute to Wikipedia have degrees of higher education, have time, have reliable internet access, and that does lead to predominantly men in the global north as the kind of first generation of Wikipedia editors. I think that we have the benefit and the urgency to try a lot of other things to figure out the answer to this question, right? So I spend most of my time in South Africa. It is a very different story. Just reliable electricity, reliable internet is a very different kind of equation. And I think that what we are partnering with our volunteer communities to ask is like, what will work here? And what that means, I think, which is also true, I think, for all institutions of privilege, is how do you go where people are and not wait for people to come find you, right? How do you go where people already are and try to find ways that pique their curiosity? I mean, I have seen young Africans who are deeply passionate about something get excited about the idea of putting it on Wikipedia. They understand it's a volunteer activity, or people who decide that there's a particular topic that they're starting to study. And so this, the reason I mentioned this gathering that our teams have this week is we have to really understand human motivation to contribute to the commons. And I think it's probably multifaceted and multi-layered, what is going to make, and then we've got to find ways to scale that culture, right, to scale that. So the benefit is, because we work with literally everybody everywhere, we can try what might work in South Asia is not what's going to work in Africa, is not what's going to work in Latin America. And the thing that gives me genuine hope is that our teams are learning fast. So what are the things that are bringing people in, are keeping them, and how are we going to ensure that, you know, it's really hard for people to imagine a world without Wikipedia, but it could happen, right? We're a nonprofit, we raise a budget every year. There's no, you know, we have to find a way that this next generation, all of you, you know, people take an interest in feeling like I can be a part of this. And I think that these experiments, Pranav, that are really quite localized are going to give us clues. And this research agenda around, in the world of AI, what keeps people motivated to continue will teach us.
Okay, so intersectional AI, right? That's the
There you go.
I think that's a great response. Okay, I have one last question, and then I think I'm over my time. So, and this one is simple. It's about that concept of neutral point of view. So that's an ideal that goes back to the beginnings of Wikipedia, and like I understand where that's coming from, but similar to my last one, like how do you maintain neutrality in a diverse society? Especially with like you have this aspiration to knowledge equity, and there are issues in communities about how to frame topics that feel for us in the university as, you know, things we can't even figure out right now, even though in this moment it's so important.
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
I mean, simple question. Again, I sort of love that we're doing this on a university campus, because one of my favorite phrases describing Wikipedia is that it does not work in theory, only in practice. Because I say these things and you're like, that cannot possibly work, and yet it does. And I think that that's, you know, it's like that's the data set I have for the last 20 years, is these things I'm about to say to you have been happening for the last 20 years, because in theory, they don't sound possible, right? So it's important to say that, you know, we've had research, a lot of research has been done on Wikipedia editors, and so there was a study that was done actually at the Harvard Business School, and what it showed is that the more people engage in points of view that are not their own, the more neutral everybody's point of view becomes, because you are forced to confront, you're forced to confront facts that maybe are unfamiliar to you. And so the work of Wikipedia is that back and forth, right? And again, as I said at the beginning, it is not a social media platform. It is not a place to have an opinion. We debate sources, we debate facts, we debate, and the back and forth of that improves everybody's neutral point of view, right? And so typically the articles about the most contested issues are the ones with the most citations, because that is where the most energy goes into what's the back and forth. These are sophisticated societies of volunteers who develop policies to figure out when is there enough consensus to print a sentence. When is there enough consensus? There is a quote from an editor who spends a lot of time on climate change. And he says, I have to read like 100 scientific articles to edit one sentence, because that's what the job requires, right? And so again, I know that sounds crazy, but that's what happens and it works. Now, does that mean that every single thing on Wikipedia is exactly, it doesn't. That's what I'm saying, is it is so humble with its errors. It is so humble about things going very wrong. It is so humble about, you know, a particular point of view that goes too far and then it needs to shift. It's a living digital enterprise, right? And so it doesn't end. You see something that is wrong, go help fix it. That's the invitation. You see something that's missing, please add it. That's the invitation. And so I think that this idea of acknowledging, and it's certainly true, at moments when society is feeling highly polarized, how do you try to find offline ways of replicating some of these concepts and forcing us all to engage with other perspectives that might make us all, again, not agree, but maybe arrive at more consensus about what the facts are.
So I have two follow-ups from the audience that build off of that. And I think they both have to do with making my question a little bit more pointy, if you don't mind.
I don't
so
mind.
So I'm going to read one version that is about the intellectual aspiration, and then there's another one that's more mechanistic. So I'll ask the intellectual one. So why set as a rule that knowledge is neutral when that idea has so often been used to promote dominant perspectives and marginalize the knowledge of women, persons of color, and people in the global south who tend to be viewed as less neutral?
I mean, I think we could end up having a debate about what does the word neutral mean, which is not what I want to focus on, because actually the premise is that this is a place that needs those untold stories, those cultures that, even oral traditions. That's a big debate in Wikipedia. How do you cite oral traditions, which in some cultures is the only way that knowledge is communicated and passed down. And I think that we have to do our job to make sure that the word neutral does not trip anybody up, because the point is we can, in the case of what I would call missing knowledge or untold stories, we got a lot of space and we need people to feel like they're invited in to come and fill it. Now, that takes a little effort. You have to understand how the kind of rules work and how to engage, and all of these communities have slightly different rules. And so what neutral doesn't mean is a dominant narrative around, right? What neutral means is on contested questions and on contested issues, we have to debate it out. We have to kind of go back and forth to arrive at consensus, enough consensus, and that consensus can keep changing, right, as new facts come to life. There was a lot of media coverage on the article about the origins of the COVID virus because that was a very contested question. And it took a long time and it's, in some cases, it's still going on. And so the recognition also that knowledge is not static, that knowledge evolves and then we have to be brave enough to change when the facts change, or to evolve our own thinking when what we thought was true may no longer be true, which I think is a hard thing.
Yeah, I mean, that is an aspiration for all of us, right? Okay, can I ask the mechanistic version? So there's actually two that I think are connected. So on this same theme, I have sort of two mechanistic ones. The first one builds off of that one I just asked. What mechanism can keep a majority view from overshadowing a more accurate minority view? So not only in Wikipedia, but also LLM-fueled tools.
Look, I don't know all the answers. I just really want to say that. But let's talk about what some of the mechanisms are that are kind of built into Wikipedia to help at least put up guardrails, right? Because of course it does happen. So one, again, is that those of you who maybe use Wikipedia more casually, you see the article that you read. But behind every article, there's a little tab. It's called Talk. You click on the Talk page, and what that is the written record of everything that has been debated, discussed, a paragraph got changed, somebody added a comma, whatever. It's all there, right? So I think that the transparency that the Talk page provides around how did we get here is critical. And that is there for, again, anybody to look at anytime. Beyond that, the ways that quote-unquote consensus is reached are again, sophisticated processes. And sometimes there is no consensus because actually there isn't consensus. And then what do you do about that? In specialized cases, we have, and again, all of the language communities are varied. We have arbitration committees, so these are volunteers who will look at cases. Somebody will bring a case and say, this article is biased in a direction that is not appropriate or doesn't reflect the majority point of view. And in that case, again, volunteers in their spare time will review the facts and can make changes to those pages because they have higher administrative rights. And so I think there are like a number of checks and balances in the system that are intended to prevent that. But the ultimate antidote is that more people are involved, right? Because when more people are involved, it's less likely that a small group is going to take something in one direction because more eyeballs are checking or engaging or debating. And I think that's why this, if you don't edit, I hope you think about it. If you don't contribute, I hope you think about it, is that the more people are engaged in this, the less risk of that happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very reasonable. I wanted to tell people, I did a project a number of years ago looking at talk pages, and one statistic is that if you download the Wikipedia download corpus, the talk pages are about 100 times longer total than the articles themselves.
Yeah.
And that shows the work that's behind the scenes.
Yeah. Can I just give a concrete example?
Yeah, absolutely.
This was covered in Slate magazine, so it's an article you can read if you're interested. One of the things that is remarkable about this experiment is that any volunteer, basically at any time, can ask a question about anything. I just want you to know I work for the volunteers. They do not work for me. And one of the issues that was raised on the English Wikipedia was whether Fox News could continue to be a reliable source that could be cited on Wikipedia, because in the different languages, there are publications that are essentially on the kind of red list, like you can't cite from these because they don't have newsworthy content or whatever the logic is. So to your point, walls of text, because that process of asking that question is not a vote. We don't say, let's see a show of hands, who thinks Fox News is reliable? No, people have to write arguments and engage in those arguments. And I mean, that was a very, very, very long. And then what happens in this system is that a volunteer who has not been an active participant in the argument raises their hand to close the debate. And what that means is they volunteer to read the walls of text and issue a reasoned argument. Again, practice, not theory, people. So this lovely graduate student who I know at Stanford named Kevin Lee raised his hand. He had not been engaged in the debate. He said in the article it took him 25 hours to read the arguments, the arguments on both sides. And then he issued, which has been my experience in all of these, like a very reasoned kind of narrow ruling that said that Fox News writ large can't be what we're looking at. It is true that the talk shows probably wouldn't count as a reliable source on Wikipedia, but that does not extend to some of the print publications, like very reasoned. That's the consensus for now. That can get reopened really any day by anybody. And so I think, again, this idea that we live in a dynamic world and we have to keep rechecking, I think is kind of inspiring and a powerful reminder that with new information, we evolve our thinking.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Can I pour some water on the inspiration? These are these last two ones that are a little bit more doomy gloomy.
Okay, that's okay. We can do doom and gloom
So the
too.
first one is just more informational. So it's asking, do you use AI in Wikipedia? And so I think you talked about that with the translation. But I wonder, maybe there's something behind that question about whether contributors themselves use it to write content. And then there's the question behind that is, how do you prevent bot infiltration? And then it ends, please explain safeguards. So you talked about some of these safeguards, but now what about the safeguards for keeping those kinds of tools out?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that the premise of what I was saying is AI doesn't do anything on Wikipedia without a human telling it to do it and checking. So I think that's really the first principle that I want to make sure that I get across. The humans are in the loop. So you might create a bot, for example, to go look for vandalism or look for curse words, because people sometimes will vandalize pages and just write a bunch of curse words. You don't need a human going and looking for all those words. You can create a tool, it goes off and does it, but then the human checks it. So those kinds of and those are AI tools, have been there since the very beginning. I think that what we are grappling with now is that the large language models of others rely very heavily on Wikipedia content. It is typically the largest single source of information in these large language models. So then what world are we in? As you know, we experimented with a plugin for ChatGPT so that you could tell ChatGPT, I only want content from Wikipedia in my answers. Now what that means is sometimes ChatGPT's like, I have nothing for you because Wikipedia has nothing for you, and I think that's kind of the learning journey that we've been on.
That's the humility, right?
If we don't know, we don't know. Then again, find somebody who does know, get them involved. So I think that having safeguards around, we just have to be clear what we know and what we don't know. We have always, I don't want to make this sound like it's only now with AI. I think since the beginning, Wikipedia is always in a complex ecosystem of technology doing things that may or may not align to our values and mission. When voice assistants came out, every time there's a new thing, people are like, that's the end of Wikipedia, like that's going to be the end. And what we see is the voice assistants draw the answers. It doesn't always tell you it's from Wikipedia. That's kind of a challenge for us because we're a nonprofit, we rely on donations. Most of those come when people come to donate on the page. If you never know the information, it's a sustainability question that we have to answer in the right way, right? Because why do our volunteers do this? They don't do it for Siri and Alexa. They're not doing it, for OpenAI. They're doing it because they have a commitment that knowledge should be free, it should be accessible, it should be available to everybody. And that's why, Pranav, I feel like continuing to go back to first principles, continuing to go back to human motivation, the answer is there. Even though we feel doom and gloom and fear about where some of these models are going to take us, and that humility of what we don't know, we just don't know.
That's very helpful, right? Even in the face of possible threat, humility about the future, and even our ignorance about these models could be an opportunity for us to reimagine. We have a question from Zoom.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm actually going to combine a couple questions about teaching, since we are on a college campus. So I'm going to read part of the question. I've used Wikipedia editing assignments in several classes I've taught using a program called Wiki Education. It was an eye-opening experience for my students to edit wiki articles. So two questions. One, how to address sometimes the seemingly insurmountable challenge after that first experience of editing, and perhaps you can talk about that a little bit. And second, does that Wiki Education program or something similar to it reach out to universities in other countries or areas with less representation?
Yeah. So Wiki Education is actually based here in Northern California. It is, we are a collection of many kinds of organizations, and the premise there is that getting people interested in editing Wikipedia at this phase of their life is fertile ground because there are topics people are interested in, they have access to the internet typically at their institutions, and time is more available. And the thing that we've seen that for me has just been the biggest endorsement of this program is that if you look at the newcomers to the English Wikipedia who stick, meaning they make more than one edit, they stay around, they make 5 edits a month, 30% of them are coming from this program, this Wiki Education program. So we have a huge investment in making sure that it succeeds and that it grows. It does take some learning and some training. Again, we have seen cases where people sort of just want to skip over the rules and then they put a bunch of stuff on Wikipedia and then somebody deletes it and then they're frustrated and, So I think trying to figure that out. It is harder to figure out how to do that in other languages from a central, it's not our job to do that. Again, we have to empower our local affiliates who then can reach out to local universities and customize that kind of curriculum if they want for them. And the same thing is true even at middle school and high school, using Wikipedia in the classroom. And I think the thing we've always said, because again, the healthy skepticism in the early days from institutions of higher education is, you can start with Wikipedia, but then you go to the citations, you go to the links below, you find the sources, and that's its tool, that's its benefit.
Okay. So I wanted to ask something about, well, there was one more doom and gloom one, but I feel like you answered it. But I'll give you the option. So this is an even more, so this is about, I guess, an alternative future. does proliferation of large language models suggest a future with multitudes of Wikipedias, each an echo chamber of alternate facts?
I'm going to give a short answer because I really learn a lot from our head of machine learning. And again, these are folks, I mean, this guy could be earning 1 million times more money somewhere else doing something else. And his commitment sort of for why he does what he does and technology for good. So his view is that as large language models spew out millions more pages of garbage on the internet, Wikipedia is going to become more and more valuable. Like, again, it's the counterintuitive, is like your child who maybe knows how to code is going to be able to create 10,000 pages of stuff that is not accurate and put it on the internet. And so in that cluttered world, this becomes even more and more and more valuable. And I think we are seeing that already to be true, right? So I have to hold on to that. One, he's the expert and that's what he says and I choose to believe him. And two, I think that that is a hopeful message that actually makes sense to me. That I think, again, the more of us that are aware of this, the more of us that are engaged, we can make it true.
Okay, that's great. So we have a bit more time. If people want to ask a question, please send your card in. Otherwise, okay. So I really appreciated your discussion about making Wikipedia and thus AI representative of the multilingual world that we live in. And I guess I had a question about that, in particular related to what we're seeing in terms of language death. You know, like you mentioned how many people encounter Wikipedia or the internet in English. English is, I mean, you mentioned Arabic, that's a great example. You know, 60% of the internet is in English. Like it's quite astounding. And so that is changing how young people engage with language as well. So I wonder, I mean, do you feel like Wikimedia has a role to play in language preservation and in combating this particular, I guess this particular factor that's going to lead to language death? Because languages die within a generation.
I mean, again, that's the reason to invest in preserving them digitally, because then they don't die in a generation, because those pages and that content continues. And so I think what we have seen is that we have to offer tools and solutions that communities can then decide for themselves what they want to do. There are some small language communities who are very anti-translation, like that's not what they want. So that does mean they just grow at a slower rate because those volunteers are committed to writing kind of from scratch. They don't want, and by translation, I don't mean they don't look at other languages, I mean they don't use content translation tools, right? Whereas for some communities, the Mint tool that I was like, these are languages that are dying. Yeah. And the very small number of people who speak them are grateful to have an institution with the right incentives and the right values supporting them and saying, let's figure out how to use good AI to be able to, in many cases, translate and then you check whether this makes sense kind of in your, so that's growing. And then the last thing, which I would describe as like a moonshot research project that we're still learning from, is something that we call wiki functions. It was called abstract Wikipedia. And the only way I've learned how to describe it in like plain English is that it takes words, natural kind of language processing, words in one language, it turns it into math equations, and then they become words in another language. And the intent of that is exactly for this question, how to preserve small languages where there will not be enough people speaking them to even use the content translation tools. We're learning, and that's a kind of big enterprise, but again, I think that that's actually a big part of our work and the goals that we have at the organization.
Okay, great. There's one question on
yes,
Zoom.
And this is in reference possibly to something you might know because it's been an active topic on the Wikimedia mailing list.
Yes.
But as the LLMs are moving into multimodal production, what is your perspective on and plan to address interactive content on Wikipedia?
I am indeed familiar, and I think I know who asked that question, so You can tell them that Marshall spoke to me, because that's, I think the real challenge, and I'm just being honest, we are a nonprofit organization. We do not have the resources of a lot of the large tech companies, and we have to prioritize where are we going to put limited capacity and time. There are so many things that Wikipedia could improve to look more like Instagram or look more like TikTok or have more. We know that. I think that the question that our volunteers keep coming back to is where to make those investments. Wikimedia Commons, as you described, is the repository for free licensed, in the public domain, images, videos, and the like. It isn't the most user-friendly in some cases because, again, you have to understand copyright, you have to put pictures there that people can redistribute and use. And so I think the volunteers want to ensure that you do a little bit of work to understand what's happening. That makes it harder for young people to be like, oh, let me just kind of contribute and sort of put a picture up. The question of interactive content like graphs, which is what I think that the question is referring to, are really important. They're kind of on the list of many other things we have to work on. And I think that the question that I sort of own is we're never going to be able to go fast enough for all of our volunteers in fixing all of these things. I think what we're choosing to prioritize are tools that help our more experienced editors be able to do more of the things that they need to do to kind of manage the commons. We are prioritizing these experiments in like the ChatGPT plugin and future audiences. And I think that in many ways, because Wikipedia is becoming more of a source for others than a destination people go, that does have to drive a strategy of what matters the most in terms of what are you kind of providing to the world. So that may be an unsatisfactory answer, but I think that that's the truth.
That's very helpful. I was actually curious about that question, so thank you to the Zoomer who asked that. We have one more question that we have time for, and this one is a bit different than what we've been talking about, so I think I would like to ask. It's an ecological question, and it's about computational infrastructure and how you manage data centers. So let me try to summarize it a bit. The massive amount of data that we have rely on an increasingly sophisticated tech infrastructure, particularly the rising data center industry, many located in non-urban settings and colder localities, and I might add in areas like the Global South. Could you elaborate more on the storage and transfer and maintenance of data? How does Wikipedia navigate the need for tech infrastructure and ensure fairness and justice on an infrastructural level?
I'm going to give the CEO answer, and if somebody wants more, my colleague Nadie will raise her hand, and she's there, and we can get you, because actually our tech engineering team wrote a long article about this exact topic, so I want to make sure that I send people to get there. So when I said in my talk that we buck a lot of trends, you know, we don't keep our data in the cloud. We keep it all in our own servers. And those have been carefully selected locations that fit our values. And we discard data about our users as quickly as possible. So we don't hold on to data. So all of these things I think are like highly unusual in the way that a lot of kind of tech infrastructure is done. Most of our infrastructure sits on an open source platform called MediaWiki. It is used by other third parties. And so I think that we have made these decisions, like we're evaluating a data center now, and that evaluation criteria is what you would expect of us. It's complex, it takes into account a bunch of different factors. And the reason we're putting it there is because it will create equity in the Global South for how quickly the pages load and how quickly you get what you need. Because when we have to take it through Europe to bring it, you know, to Africa, that's not fair, actually. So putting these data centers in locations that increase the equity and the experience is also really important. But there's like a very long article on exactly this that we can also share.
And do you think that that dovetails with the question that Zach asked, that, you know, the fact that you're delivering text also reduces the amount of storage and the traffic?
Well, there is no doubt that any video multimedia solution has a serious storage question that needs to also be answered. And so again, the debate that's on the Wikimedia L list actually is quite robust, because a lot of these questions are getting asked by our volunteers as well.
Well, we have more questions. I'm sure there are more in the audience. I want to thank you so much. This was a wonderful conversation. And Maryana said that she wants to talk to all of you. She greeted you all at the door. So I want to give you all time to talk to her as well. Thank you so much. This was so wonderful.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you. Thank you.
That was great.